Excellent. Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park. My name is Cara Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome tonight Amelia Possanza to celebrate her book, Lesbian Love Story, a Memoir in Archives. Let's give it up for Amelia. I'm really glad to welcome Amelia because we work together in her publicity capacity, and it makes me unreasonably happy when people who work in the book business are able to put their own work into the world. I think it's absolutely something to celebrate, and I'm very honored that we get to be the store to do so. I'm also exceptionally glad that Amelia is joined tonight by San Francisco's own and Green Apple favorite, Nina LaCour. Let's give it up for Nina. Thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited. I also really believe in this book. It's a great book, and so I'm very glad that we get to celebrate it and we get to celebrate it together. Thank you for joining us both in person here and online. Hello, online people. We're broadcasting from San Francisco. We are on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land, and we hope that you join us in our pledge to turn land acknowledgement into action by either donating your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear, or in my case, speak a land acknowledgement. I have very brief business before we get to the fun part of the evening. First, now is a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. Not the end of the world, but why be that guy? Please do check out our full event calendar on our website at greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season ahead of us, including the event that you are currently attending, so check that out. The restroom is behind us. It is available after the event and not during the event for obvious reasons. It's also only available to attendees of our event during event time. It's kind of the one place that my colleagues have off the floor for themselves, and I try and respect those boundaries for them. But I think if you're coming to a show, you should be able to use the restroom. So thanks for being cool about that. Thank you also for buying books from us, if you already have or if you're planning on it. If you've been here before, you've definitely heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, but you support the writers who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you are able, we always appreciate it. Thank you so much. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the two writers that are joining us tonight. First, Nina LaCour is the Michael L. Prince award-winning and nationally best-selling author of Watch Over Me, We Are Okay, Hold Still, and Everything Leads to You. Her first adult novel, Yerba Buena, is now available in paperback. She hosts the podcast Keeping a Notebook and teaches for Hamline University's MFA in Writing for Children and Young Adults program. A former indie bookseller, all right, and high school English teacher, she lives with her family in San Francisco. Let's give another hand for Nina LaCour. Last but most certainly not least, Amelia Possanza is a full-time book publicist and part-time writer who currently lives in Brooklyn with her cat. Her work has appeared in the Washington Post, BuzzFeed, Electric Literature, The Millions, and NPR's Invisibilia. Lesbian Love Story is her first book and the reason we are here tonight, so let's give one more hand for Amelia Possanza. Not someone else's.
Hello. Cara, thank you for introducing me as a publicist, because I have booked so many events at this store and I have never been in person, and it only feels right that my first time here is not in the audience seat, but it's up here. So thank you for having me. And thank you for joining me, Nina, who I am Nina's publicist, and the tables have turned.
I love it so much. I was like, I'm gonna have to be really aggressive if I talk first, because I know Amelia's gonna just be so at home, being a publicist, and
well, despite being so at home, I was gonna start by reading, and now I'm like, oh, my book's in my backpack, so I'm just gonna take this book. It's up here for me. And I was telling Nina that I was going to start by reading a little bit about the origin of this book, which started with my curiosity about Stonewall, and we're at the start of San Francisco's Pride weekend, which I think the origin of Pride is celebrating the anniversary of Stonewall. And I'm staying at a friend's apartment, and I can see the pink triangle on top of Twin Peaks, from my friend's bed. Their bed is in, I think, what should be the living room of the house. I'm sorry to out them as having rearranged their house. And so their bed just like looks out on Twin Peaks, and like every morning when I wake up, there's this pink triangle, and that's amazing to me. I think to me that's an even better symbol of pride than the rainbow. So yeah, I'm gonna start and read about how Stonewall accidentally inspired me to write this book. I first stumbled on Mary's name in a history book. New York City was preparing to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the 1969 Stonewall riots, a moment in queer history that is often studied as an inflection point in the fight for gay liberation. I picked up a book on the subject to join in the festivities. Before I could make it through the first chapter, though, this woman stopped me in my tracks. This is a quote. Among the first rare early American books to depict lesbian love is the autobiography of Mary Cassatt, The Stone Space Wall, published in 1930. If I wanted to build a collection of lesbians, then surely I needed to include one of the first to write down her love story for publication. Mary's life, I would come to learn, straddled the turn of the century, an era when new doors to economic independence were open to women. From the opportunity to attend recently founded women's colleges to the creation of secretary jobs that allowed women to use the skills they had learned at school to earn their own income. Women formed relationships far from the watchful eyes of their fathers and future suitors. Still, few could afford to set down the intimate emotional and physical details of their relationships outside the confines of personal letters and private diaries. Through the act of writing, Mary showed herself and others that lesbian meant something more than a private sexual perversion. It was a way of life, a kind of love that could connect her to an entire community.
So beautiful. I have to tell you that I also wanted you to read a little part of your book, so you're going to have to read a little bit more.
All right, I'm going to take a sip of water first.
Yes,
and get ready.
Yes. I just want to say how happy I am to be with you here to celebrate your beautiful book, and congratulations on your first book being out in the world. It's such a huge deal. And when you sent it to me, to read, I was so excited to read it, and I was also very unhappy because I hate reading things on screens, and it wasn't printed yet in any form, so I was just like, oh gosh, another like screen book. But I remember I went to this a garden cafe in Oakland, and it was a beautiful summer day, and it was last year, it was almost a year ago, I guess, right? I think so. Yeah, or it was last fall maybe. Beautiful, Bay Area summer weather day, and I opened up, the document, and I started to read, and I read just the first paragraph, which is what I want you to read, and I was just like, oh, this is going to be so good, and I didn't even care that I was reading it on an iPad. I just loved it, and it was such just a joy to read and to follow the story, which is the story of you and the story of these 7 different, couples in their various forms. And I'll ask you a little bit about the couples too in a bit. But first, will you please read the first paragraph of your introduction?
Sure. The first paragraph or the first two paragraphs?
Just the first one.
Okay, great. Wow, I feel like I'm in school. All right. I have been lucky enough in my life to fall in love 3 times. First with water, then with stories, and finally with lesbians. It was easy to share those first 2 loves. I come from a family of storytellers, and even my enemies on the swim team loved the water. That last love, though, left me lonely.
Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. It's such a beautiful opening. And, when reading your introduction, even though I knew as a lesbian that there hadn't been, many stories told before, and that there was, such a lack of representation, and that we were kind of like forging our own way through what love was. Reading your book, it really put words to that experience of like want of the lack of knowing, about our own history, and of like the need, and of just like the emotional need. Like I think I hadn't ever acknowledged that to myself, really, that like, oh, we've seen like all of these, representations of what love can look like and what romantic relationships can look like, but so few of them, are mirroring or like showing us an example of what to be. And so I like finished the introduction, and then I was just so ravenous for more and to have you share these histories with us. So I wanted to begin by asking you, what is a love story to you? Because there's a collection of love stories, and there are different types of love, and different types of love stories. And so how did you come to decide on these particular love stories? And did you like create a definition for yourself or a framework when you started working on this?
When I started working on this, I was like so concerned with the word lesbian, and I was like, oh, what's a lesbian? What does that mean? Like, what did it mean to be a lesbian in 1920 versus now? Do people still even use that word? Like, have we moved on to sapphic? That I was like, oh, I know what love is. Like, that's not the inquiry that's happening here. Perhaps in a very like, I don't know, there's a lot of hubris there. And I did definitely originally imagine that it would be very traditional, like almost rom-com-esque love stories. So like the woman I was reading about, Mary Casal, her memoir is a lot about her relationship with this woman, Juno, and they were together for like 15 years. And it's like, I don't know, there are so many twists and turns in that story that it could be its own like novel. And so I was like, okay, great. Every chapter is it's going to be like this. Mm-hmm. And as I went along, that was really challenged by what was actually available in history. And I feel like that's the beauty, or like for me at least, why I like working with research and archives, is that if I was like left to just write, the story that I imagined, there would be no challenge to those preconceptions. So as I went along, like, the story from the 80s of this woman, Amy Hoffman, who was taking care of her friend Mike when he was dying of AIDS. I met her, and when I was interviewing her, I was like, oh, your best friend Mike, what was it like taking care of him? And she's like, oh, he's not my best friend. Like, he was really difficult. Like, I loved him, but he was like such an asshole. Like, her exact words. And so, yeah, I liked that what I found really challenged what I thought about love. And I went into it thinking of romance and, epic journeys. And I came away with a lot of like friend love, political love, community love. So I think that was challenged more than my definition of lesbian.
I love that. And I also, just since you're talking about the definition of lesbian, I really enjoyed the way that you talked about language and about like the self-identifying language that we use and how that changes over time. And I wondered if you would speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, this was just on my mind every day, because there's such a richness of language today that's like beautiful and wonderful. And when we're talking about people from 100 years ago or more, they didn't have access to that. They, often it was something secretive or shameful. Just to talk about Mary again, she wrote this book, The Stonewall, as her memoir, and she was sort of commissioned to do it by these two men who were amateur sexologists. So they like weren't scientists, no idea what kind of degrees they had. They were businessmen, and they're like, oh, we can make money, if this gets like banned for being obscenity, by the Comstock law, then we will just, we'll make a killing off of her story. And so in the book, she doesn't have a lot of language to talk about what her identity is. She kind of thinks that she's the only person, she's like the only woman with such a nature. Mm-hmm. And she, I don't know what's edited out by these two men. They definitely call her a lesbian. But it's not even that she didn't have the work, but she was kind of like denied the opportunity to do that for herself. And she talks about really complicated things like being a Gemini, like her astrological sign is really important to her, because she's like, I have two natures, like I am a man and I am a woman. And so it's like, there's so much going on there that she doesn't have the language to tell us about, at least not in the way that we understand it today. And I can't go back and interview her the way that I can interview, Amy Hoffman, to tell me like, no, Mike was an asshole, just to set the record straight. So I tried to just kind of lean into that and like capture different phrases that people used in different time periods, and also be open to the possibility that my ideas about a particular figure could change. Like, I became really interested. She's not one of like the 7 main lesbians, but I became really interested in Louisa May Alcott, maybe because I saw Greta Gerwig's adaptation of Little Women, which I think like really leaves the door open to queerness or sort of a different future for Jo. And I was like, whoa, you know, like, and so there's this famous interview where she says that she's like convinced that she's like a man's soul trapped in a woman's body because she's only fallen in love with like pretty girls, right? And so again, like my tools for understanding what's going on there are really limited. And I think in the first chapter, when I was naive and full of hubris and excited, I was like, she's a lesbian, and I'm so excited to claim her as a lesbian. And then, you know, later on, I was researching a male impersonator, which is kind of like the ancestor of drag kings, and kind of this like amazing moment after World War II when a lot more like gender expression possibilities opened up for queer people because there weren't as many rules regulating what you could wear. You know, it wasn't like, oh, if you're a woman, you can't wear pants, that's illegal. You could, you know, you could really pick and choose. And I stumbled upon some people who see Louisa May Alcott as Lou, as a trans man, and I was like, okay, I want there to be room for that as well. So I think I also handled that by not looking for definitive answers, because it's not up to me what someone else's identity is at all.
Yeah, well, you make that so clear so many times throughout the book when you're, you know, talking about the different different people. And
I think of them as characters too. I definitely have come to think of them. That's why I love that Mary used a pseudonym, because her real name was Ruth Fuller Field, so it's easy for me to separate, like, Ruth is the historical figure and like Mary's this character.
Yes. Yeah, well, you're just very... one of the aspects of your book that appeals to me is kind of the self-conscious nature of it. Like, you know, it is part memoir and part history and part kind of, you know, imagining the details of the history, part placing yourself, you know, with these people who lived, you know, in some cases, like much, you know, long ago, right? But imagining yourself with them. And so I wanted to ask you about the memoir aspect. And one of in my little blurb on the back of your book, I said that it was voraciously.
Thank you for that blurb.
Oh, of course. I just had to drop that in. But I said that it was voraciously researched, and that was something that I loved about it. I was like, this feels like just as much just like a passion, like in the best way, a passion project. Yeah. You know, something that you fell like in love with all of this research, and then like made this beautiful creation from all that you had found. So and
maybe fell in love with some of the people in it in a creepy way.
Very clearly, yeah. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about it, kind of like what came first for you. Yeah. Like, did it begin more memoir, and then you wanted to like research, or was it like you were doing all of this research and then you decided you needed to put yourself in the story as well? And what was the process of just kind of, you know, the crafting this book for you and your decision?
Well, I feel like the other piece of the origin story that's not as I don't know, beautiful and wrapped up with a little bow as discovering Mary was that I am on a big gay swim team in New York City. And it's technically an LGBTQIA plus swim team, but I would say it's very heavy on the G. And when I moved to New York City and I was young, even though I'm still young, I just see this as sort of like my younger self. I was like really frustrated and angry with them for taking up so much space. Some of them assumed that I was straight, even though I was on this team, and didn't even sort of give me the space to self-identify. And I was like, excuse me, I'm wearing Birkenstocks. Like, how do you not know? Like, how do you not even know that Birkenstocks are kind of like queer-coded in this way? You know, that was like news to them. And so I think I imagined writing this just like really angry essay about gay men, you know? So I was talked out of that, and I'm very grateful that, you know, people wiser than myself were like, that's, you know, that's interesting. And I eventually decided, okay, instead of channeling that rage into just like a screed, I should go out and find these people and can share them and can kind of bring them back to my team and to other people. So I think the memoir stayed in there because I think that anger was very real, but also sort of placing myself as someone who felt disconnected from, I think, both a contemporary community of non-gay men, queer people, and also like a historical community. I'm in this phase, you've written so many more books than I have, and I don't know if this happens to you, but I'm in this phase of being like, I'm still discovering, like the book has already been printed and I can't change it, but I'm still discovering new things. And I went to the GLBT Historical Society, I don't know, a couple days ago, and someone did a project where they like matched living people with like an archived deceased person, and they like go forth and find out about it, and it was really beautiful. And they did a book about it, and in the introduction there's this quote that I haven't memorized yet, but I wish it was in the book, about sort of like part of the experience of being queer is searching for this community like in the present, because part of being queer is like feeling isolated, but also searching for this community in the past, because there is so much like secrets and missing records. And I love that, and I think that like longing was something that I wanted to keep in through the memoir.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that so much. You telling this story made me want you to read this little part out loud, because it's so good. You can read it from mine.
Okay, great.
You can choose.
Turn to page 2 in your in your reader. Okay. I think I know where you want me to start without being told.
Yeah.
Okay. Mostly grown and living in New York City, I still rarely spotted other lesbians. I joined a queer swim team, but it was full of gay men who didn't recognize me. After a grueling ocean swim at Coney Island, a whiskered teammate asked if I wanted to have kids. No. Are you a lesbian or something? I'm on a gay swim team. I had a cat and Doc Martens. I kept my nails short. I just don't think about women, he apologized. I mean, I don't think about women like that, as having a sexuality. I was furious. I had always found both solace and freedom in the water, like many queer people before me, and I was surprised he could not see how we shared this. How could I blame him, though? If I had yet to find role models who could show me how to live, where would he have seen a lesbian? I craved more than simple stereotypes. I wanted stories and heroes that would explain to my teammate how to recognize us. More moments of private intimacy and public recognition. More reflections that rendered my own image visible. Simply put, I wanted more lesbians.
The humor in the book is really great. And I like that part. Okay, so I really want to know about your research.
Okay.
And so maybe you could, while telling us about your research, also tell us about some of the people that you chose to write about.
Well, maybe I'll start with the GLBT Historical Society, because I was so excited to finally be able to go. I think when I started this project, I imagined like taking cross-country journeys and like, you know, going to Texas, going to California, and the pandemic happened. Mm-hmm. I think that's where a lot of the obsession came in, because I was isolated a lot of the time, and I was like, oh, my dead friends are hanging out with me. But a lot of the research ended up being a little more like remote than I wanted it to, so it's been wonderful to go to places and meet people who helped me along the way. But here in San Francisco, the person that I was looking into was Rusty Brown, and I mention her in part because I think that Rusty was a nickname, and so she's the person that I know the least about. Like, she was in San Francisco on Treasure Island to train as a welder during World War II. She had a lot of romances aboard various Navy ships during the war, like some romantic moments by wind turbines. And she's this great phrase where she's like, we had a lot of foreplay, but there wasn't any time to get down to brass tacks. And so she was interviewed by a historian named Len Evans here in San Francisco, and you can listen to the interviews at the GLBT Historical Society. You can hear her cats in the background. And she also was a male impersonator, but, you know, like I've asked the military, you know, for her records, and during COVID, they actually were only providing records to family members. And I have sort of like, I got an Ancestry.com account, and searching Rusty Brown, I foolishly did not realize what was going to happen when you put the words Rusty Brown into Ancestry.com, but you all might be able to imagine how that turned out for me. And then also So she was interviewed by Len Evans, and she's also interviewed by another San Francisco person because she was here for her military training. She went back to New York where she worked in the Navy Yard. She worked on Coney Island. I kind of like loved in the process of the book too that like I love Coney Island as a place where I swim and hang out with my teammates, but a lot of the people I researched ended up there for different reasons, and there was a side show at Coney Island where Rusty performed. But then later in life, sort of in the era of McCarthyism, there was such a crackdown on the theater, and her partner was a burlesque dancer and stripper, and so she actually became a nurse, and they moved out west and eventually ended up in San Francisco, where she was interviewed by Marcy Edelman, who studies aging of queer populations, and she's been doing it since she was in her 20s. She's now 77, so she's now like part of the population that she studies. And so I had brunch with her 2 days ago, and it was kind of amazing because I said to her, I was like, can you tell me like who Rusty was? And she was like, oh, you've heard the tapes. Like, you don't feel like that gave you a sense of her? And I was like, no, but like, what was her real name? And she was like, oh, but she used the name Rusty for most of her life. Like, what else do you need to know? And I kind of, that gave me some peace of like, you know, the things that there was sort of this hungry, obsessive research process of like, oh, I want her birth certificate and I want to be able to like pin her down. And I kind of loved this like breezy attitude of like, you saw her the way that she wanted to be remembered or the way that she wanted people to see her. And
Yeah.
So that hopefully through that story you can kind of tell like I interviewed people, I spent too much money on Ancestry.com, I wrote to the military, which I never thought that I would end up doing in my life.
I'm so impressed. I always really enjoy hearing about process.
Yeah.
So I'm also curious, like, did you, I mean, this is a very nerdy question, but like, how did you organize your note? Like, how did you take?
Oh man,
like, did you take?
I did a really bad job. Don't do what I did. Like after the fact, people taught me about like there's something called like Scrivener, which do you use Scrivener?
I have, yes.
Like there's like software that you can use to like keep track of like people and ideas and threads. And I like literally had like a Google Doc, and then there's like all these citations in the back, and I learned very late in the process there are actually like wonderful websites now that didn't exist when I was in college where you can literally, I see an academic nodding in the audience, not to, you know, point anyone out, but I'm like, their whole website, like I think Zotero, where you can just like keep track of your sources, and no one, I like wrote a whole book in a Google Doc, and I was like, how do I cite things? So don't do what I did. The process was bad. I took a lot of like, I also listened to a lot of oral history tapes between Mabel Hampton and Joan Nessel. If you don't know, Joan Nessel founded the Lesbian Her Story Archives in Brooklyn, first out of her apartment. Now they have a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn, and she did it in part with Mabel Hampton, who was her elder, was a dancer in the Harlem Renaissance, also participated in World War II. And there are all these beautiful tapes of them talking to each other, which is its own kind of love story in a way. And I listened to these tapes. I hand wrote what I heard when I liked it with like a timestamp in a notebook. And so then I'd be like, oh, where's that quote about like, you know, going to Eve Adams's tea room, right? And then I'm like, okay, I'm flipping through really bad ideas.
But it worked.
Yeah. Well, I think I would like write really bad drafts of chapters, but I almost had to sort of like learn the material before I could turn it into a story. And so writing was almost a way to like help me remember sort of the different moments in someone's life or like get to know them.
Yeah, I can see that. You brought up Joan and those tapes, and I loved reading about those tapes. And one of my favorite parts of that is like when Joan is wanting Mabel to like give her a different answer or like say a different thing. And as a fiction writer, I really like chafe at the idea of having to like be factually accurate and not allowing myself to just like take the story where I want it to go. And I wonder, like, were there times when you felt like Joan, like where you were like searching for a specific thing, you know, where to turn the narrative in a way, or to like mirror your own experiences in a way, or like.
Well, a lot of these were unhappy stories. Like, I feel like I'm talking about the fun parts, but I think I really chafed at some of the really hard things that people lived through. And like, one thing that kind of emerged in the process was that a lot of these people sort of faced like multiple different layers of marginalization in their lives. It wasn't just that they were lesbians. There was a lot of sexual assault that happened, racism, people being out of work, people not being able to pay their rent. So I think a lot of that, I really, you know, again, didn't fit my like rom-com idea of love. And, you know, I feel like Mary Casal was sort of my first love in this process. Like, a lot of times it comes back to her, and her and Juno were like together for 15 years. And I was like, oh, this beautiful love story. And then, you know, after 15 years, Juno started having all these affairs and running off with different people, men, women, someone that Mary thought of as a gay man. And they would sort of make up again, and I'd be like, no, Mary, like, I thought you had learned. And I think I did kind of cheat with that one, because like, in part because I couldn't follow the story anymore. Like, the way that she wrote her memoir, I was like, I actually don't understand what's going on. And in part because I couldn't bear it, you know, like that became one paragraph of the story. So I think even though I couldn't alter the truth, I could kind of expand my focus in some places, and then in other places be like, okay, well, they had this really tumultuous end to their relationship, but we're gonna move through that quickly because I can't fully capture the timeline.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's your right as the writer, as the crafter of this piece.
And maybe that's why the memoir stayed in there too. I was sort of like, if I'm gonna be biased, I think that like all history is biased, and for a long time, or at least when I was in school, people pretended like it was like the truth, capital T, and you know, it wasn't the story of like the winners or the colonizers. And so I was like, oh, I'm just going to be honest that this is a really biased history of lesbians. This is not the official authorized encyclopedia. It's my version.
Okay, so I have many more questions, but I have time for one more of my own, and then I would like you all to be able to ask questions too, of course.
And if you don't have questions, I will just ask Nina questions, which I also love doing.
Okay, we will not do that. Okay, well, I can't decide between two. These are both kind of general questions, but I want to know both of them, and maybe they can be combined.
Okay,
so
great.
One is just, you know, you only are a debut author once, and so I do want to know a little bit about just like how your experience has been sending this book out into the world. And also I want to know what your next, like once you are finished with this tour and you get to go home, and I want to know what your next
my cat.
Yes, I want to know what your next project will be, and it doesn't have to be a book project. It can be like anything at all. But like, what is the thing that you've been putting off because you've been devoting your attention to this?
I think I might answer both of those.
Okay,
wonderful.
Both of great.
And I think for the debut author one, I might just stick to like two of my favorite things that have happened. Okay. One of them is that sometimes when people, is that when people talk to me, they really feel the need to disclose their sexuality in this hilarious way. You know, I don't require it. It's not, you want to get a book signed, you don't have to come tell me what your sexuality is. But kind of in a way that I appreciate. Like, I was interviewed by a guy, right? And he was like, hi, Amelia. And I was like, hi. Like, that was the whole extent of the conversation. He's like, before we get started, I want you to know that I'm not a lesbian. But I really related to your book. And I was like, oh, well, thank you. And like, he's not the only one. And that was definitely not something I expected as part of the process of sharing this book with the world. But I think I do love people being like, oh, I relate to lesbians, even though I'm not one. Because you could kind of replace lesbian with anything in that sentence. And it would hopefully still be very true. Yeah. Yes. And that same person actually, like, we had a wonderful conversation. He was talking about how he just gone through a breakup. And he's like, and I weirdly really related to like a lot of the love stories in your book. And I was like, yeah, dude. And then he also, Mabel Hampton has this catchphrase that I love that kind of became, I don't know, like my mission statement for the book a little bit, which was the dead take care of me and so do the living. Because she was orphaned And she didn't have a traditional family. She was sexually abused by a blood relation that she ran away from. And I just loved that sentiment of like, we should all be taking care of each other. And like, I want these people I researched to take care of me, but I don't want to forget about, the people in reality along the way. And as I was talking to this guy, not a lesbian, he kept quoting that back to me. Aww. And I think that was a moment where I was like, oh, this is what it means to be an author. Like, I communicated something to someone and he like remembers it and he thinks about it. And that just was so moving to me. And in terms of what to do next, I mean, seeing my cat, I have not been cooking. I really want to be cooking again, but I also really want to write another book. I realized, like, as a publicist, I was like, oh, maybe I'll enjoy being on the other side of this. And I'm like, oh, I actually don't. I just want to be at home with my dead friends again. I think I want to be like you and write a novel now.
Amazing.
And I did a lot of like history, and I'm like, okay, I want to use the queer history to like imagine a queer future. And I don't know much more than that, except maybe I want to write a budget for New York City of my own. And have that maybe be like the middle of,
So great.
I love archives and records, and I'm like, oh, I can create like fake future records. Yeah,
that sounds great.
Well, so if you have any tips for how to write a novel and be more organized than a notebook full of Mabel Hampton's quotes that you think you heard on a tape, I'm all ears.
You sound far more organized than I am. I literally this morning had 3 different notebooks.
Oh yeah.
All with, but not, like they aren't separated by theme. There are just 3 different notebooks in which I have written random things for my book and I'm searching through them all. So you don't want to take that advice from me, but
people have been like, don't you want to go do a residency? And part of me is like, like so afraid of rejection that I don't apply. But part of me is like, okay, but I have like the notebook, this notebook for this thing and that notebook for that thing. And then like I was like, how would I bring them all? I'd rather be in my home. So I could have my 3 notebooks with my insane notes.
Yes. I approve. All right. Do any of you have questions for Amelia?
If you were to take any of them out on a swim date.
On a swim date?
And like Babe, like swimming, kind of like quality of swimming, Babe Didrikson would probably be the best. Like that's null, like based on personality.
Yeah, I feel like we didn't talk about Babe Didrikson at all, so I might start. The question was, who would I want to swim with?
Yeah.
In a casual way. And Babe Didrikson was an Olympian. I feel like I was in love with all of these people. Except for Babe, because she just scares me. Like, she really tried to intimidate her opponents. So she did like basketball, track and field, golf. She bragged about her swimming, and I've actually seen videos of her swimming, and I think she was like, okay. She can work on her technique. But I don't know that I would want to hang out with her. She just seemed mean. Who would I want to go swimming with? I mean, Coney Island used to be a queer beach, and I think like there's so many threads that I wish I kind of had pulled at more, and one of them is like I would love to know more about, because like Audre Lorde talks about being there. Mabel Hampton would go. She's like, I didn't swim, but I was there. So I feel like I'd want to just like go to Coney Island, not with my teammates, and like have just the queer beach people of like the 70s hanging out. I don't even need to know their names, but that would be the dream. Thank you for that question. Anyone else, or should I start asking Nina questions?
Please, someone save me.
What's your favorite book right now that you're like very excited about reading?
Oh, well, I'm very excited about reading this GLBT archives book about like matchmaking in the archive. I'm like, I want to like meet the person who started this project, and I want to be like, can we do it at the Lesbian History Archives? Like, I think it's just such a genius way to engage people and like have them be the living who take care of the dead. But also in terms of, I don't think it's here at Green Apple. But I also have been obsessed. I went on vacation a couple of months ago and I read Gina Chung's Sea Change. about a young woman who's kind of lost in life and works at an aquarium and is like obsessed with the octopus. And someone told me recently that there was a Goodreads review that was like 5 stars, and the review was, I too am one octopus friend, away from a mental breakdown. And I was like, okay, that's a great description of the novel. And I also just think that, like, I'm in my 30s. A lot of my friends who I talk to who are in their 30s are all kind of in this place of being like, oh, we were promised a lot about, like, our generation of what that would look like, of like, okay, if you get a college education and you get a job and you save money, you're gonna have like a house and a family. And then we went through the whole, like, you all are eating avocado toast so you don't have houses phase. It's like, no, that's actually not the problem. And I think that the novel did a really great job of kind of capturing that melancholy and frustration that I do think is like unique to our generation, and was not at all didactic about like how to get through it, how to not eat avocado toast and buy a house, but was just very like sweet of sitting with that feeling. And like I felt less lonely in that feeling reading the book, and like recommended it to friends who were also like, oh yeah. So clearly that's the book I just can't stop talking about.
Sounds good. Yeah, perfect.
Did anyone almost make it in the book but didn't?
Ooh, I'll repeat it for the online audience. Did anyone almost make it in the book but didn't? And I'm so glad you asked that, because that was one of my questions too that I didn't get to ask.
Well, I guess 2 things. First, there were people, I'm from Pittsburgh, and I think at a certain point I wanted the project to have some kind of connection to Pittsburgh, and I became really hung up on Rachel Carson. And I was like, is she a lesbian? What's going on there? She had an assistant named Ida. She was like never married, and I think she kind of fit with like figures like Mary Casal, who took advantage of an education and like as a means to independence. But I did not get very far down that track. But the other wonderful thing about having a book in the world is that like it doesn't feel as lonely trying to find these answers, because someone from Pittsburgh read the book and told me that there's another Pittsburgher going through her letters and uncovering some of her romantic relationships with women. And I was like, okay, who's writing that book? Like, I need to read it. And it's like, I haven't learned yet what it's called. I'm very excited about that. And then, like, again, this wonderful thing happens that now people are like telling me about figures that I should have included. And I think like 2 of the ones that come to mind immediately are Sarah Josephine Baker, who is not Josephine Baker, who's like also in the book as a queer person. So like something very queer about being a Josephine Baker. But Sarah Josephine Baker was a doctor in New York. She found Typhoid Mary twice, and she was a doctor before there were a lot of female doctors. And she wrote a lot of letters to someone who called herself a woman-oriented woman. So, like when I'm thinking about words that people are trying to use to describe their queerness when they're not sort of offered a lot of options, like love that. And then in New York, we also have Alice Austen, who was a photographer in the Victorian era and would like invite her friends over, and they would all like get in bed together or like put on men's clothing and take all these photos. And in the pandemic, I became a cyclist. I always was like so afraid of bicycles, and then I couldn't get anywhere. And I loved reading about how a lot of queer women, and even the suffragettes at the time, were like really excited about bicycling as like a means for independence. And so her and her lover and her lover's former lover, the 3 of them together, right? Like made this book called Bicycling for Ladies, which was literally a manual about like how to ride a bike, how to take care of your bike. And they took all these photos of being in these like elaborate dresses and how to like weight down the bottom of your skirt so it wouldn't fly up while you were bicycling. And even though the title was Bicycling for Ladies, it was always like he, right? Like that was the neutral way to talk about the reader, even when in the title you're like, it is for ladies and he will weigh down the bottom of his skirt to ride. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm like, oh yes, I cannot stop thinking about Alice Austen. And Rebecca and I went to the museum on Staten Island, and we were like the only 2 people there. And we were like, hello, like we are ready to, and there's a whole podcast now called My Dear Alice, where it's like reading her letters and kind of talking about what's happening at the time. And I find it very sweet and very well done, like all different voices for the different letter writers and recipients.
Fun. Oh, I want to listen to that. This
yeah, it's very sweet.
Well, I hope there will be some future essays on some of these people, or some way that you will.
Oh, and I think that the YA author Alex Gino wrote a novel about Alice Austen as well. I think it has not gotten as much love as Melissa.
Yes.
But yeah.
Cool. Oh, great. That's something to know. See, being a publicist. So, yeah. And here's another author. All right. I think we are. Well, we have time for one more question. Somebody. One more.
I definitely have one for Nina. Because I do want to say, as your publicist, the paperback of Yerba Buena is out now.
Thank you.
And I feel like a lot of your career has been about like writing love stories between women. And we were talking about the lack of representation. So when you think about like, okay, I'm going to write an original, not bound by the archive love story between two women, what do you sort of take as your inspiration when, at least I'm not seeing a lot of that out there? I didn't grow up with a lot of that. Like, are you like, okay, this is going to be like two straight people, but I'm going to make them women? I mean, I know that's probably not what you did, but just as an option.
Well, that makes me think about how when we were assigned to each other, however that works in your world.
We get to ask.
Oh, okay, good.
I was like, it's gay and I want it.
And I remember you saying, wasn't it the first one that you had, like the first lesbian novel that you had publicized?
And I think that you came along like a decade into my career.
Wow. Yeah.
And that was a decade of I had worked on some gay men and their novels.
But who knew that women had a sexuality?
Who knew that women had a sexuality?
I don't know. I worked on that book for so long. I started working on it when I was very young, like just finishing at San Francisco State. And I took it to grad school, and then I didn't know what to do with it because there was like no story there. I had two characters, but I didn't have like a story, and it took me so many years to figure out what the story was. And when I think about it, I think I did feel the impact of not having traditional narratives to write in, or narratives to write in the tradition of, in a way, because my novels before then were all like coming of age novels, older teen protagonists, and then I was like, how do I write a novel about these two women who go through years and try to work out this relationship and see if they can be together and grow up. And I felt like I needed to grow up in order to do it. And it was really a cool but very challenging experience to write that story. But I just wanted to, I think we were talking a little bit, just joking before we got up here about the queer ultimatum. And
yes, I try and bring this up at every single one of my events, so I'm so glad.
I came in at the very end to bring it up, but about not problematic, but the fact that we are all flawed, right? That it's this is the representation, there can be pretty bad people in the queer ultimatum, and I think I really struggled a lot with representation and knowing that there weren't that many novels about lesbians, and being how can I make them messy and flawed but still I just still have this responsibility. And
there's a lot of extra pressure sometimes.
So there was a lot going on there. But
the last sort of selling publicist thing that I'll say about your novel, because I think there's someone in the audience who works at a florist shop, and there's a lot of great florist stuff going on in your book. And these flowers are from one of my other authors' garden. So thank you.
Thank you, Amelia, for coming to San Francisco. It was really a pleasure to have you here.
San Francisco. You all live in a great place. Expensive, but great place.
And thank you, Green Apple, as always, for hosting.
Yeah, thank you.
Can we get one more hand for Amelia Possanza? So much.
Oh my gosh, thank you. What a fun first time for me to be at Green Apple Books. It was pretty good.
It's it's very exciting. I'm excited for you. And thank you all for joining us. This has been a blast. We have books from both Amelia and Nina at the front register. You can find them there. And I'm going to have Amelia back here at the back desk signing them. So find the books up there, bring them back here, and you might find something in between. I'm okay with that. But yeah, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.